And joining me now is Republican Congresswoman Nancy Mace of South Carolina. Congresswoman, welcome back to Meet the Press.
Good morning.
I want to start to get your reaction to what happened in Kansas. When you look at Kansas and South Carolina, they, in some ways, at least on their presidential vote, mirror each other. 56%, I think, for Trump in one, 55% in the other. And here you saw this resounding 59% of Kansans reject the idea of essentially getting rid of a constitutional amendment that could have led to rolling back rights to an abortion. Your reaction?
Well, I think we're seeing it on both sides now, too, the extremities of both sides. On the far left, you have folks that want abortion for any reason up until birth. And then on the far right, we have states that are trying to ensure that no abortion for any reason, including rape and incest victims and girls. And that's not okay with the electorate either. And I see it in my own district, in my own state. The vast majority of people here are okay with some guardrails, but they don't want the extremities of either side. And they're seeing states push forward with legislation, like in my state of South Carolina, there's legislation that would ban the word abortion on a website or a website server. There are folks that want to ban women from traveling out of state. There are folks, like in my state, that want to ban abortion for women who are victims of rape and girls who are victims of incest. And that's just, both sides have these extremities where the vast majority of people just are not there right now. And there has to be a place for the center on this very emotional issue.
Let me ask you this. Everything you describe about sort of the fallout from this, there was a simple way to avoid this fallout, and that was keeping Roe. In hindsight, I know you were somebody that thought you wanted to see Roe v. Wade overturned. Was that a mistake?
Well, I am staunchly pro-life, but there were issues with Roe. Even Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg had issues constitutionally, the right to privacy versus the right to equal protection under the law. You saw Joe Biden 40 years ago trying to look at doing away with it as well. And so I think that there are issues with Roe in terms of the constitutionality of it. And the overturning of it now leads it to the states, state legislatures in particular, but also Congress can have a role here. But the problem that we have today, Chuck, and I know that you see this every single day, are the political divisions. And because this is such an emotional issue, this is a place where we really should be working together. If you look across the pond, you look at European nations, if you're even allowed to have one, there are gestational limits. In most countries in Europe, you're looking at 12 to 15 weeks there. And there are other, exceptions that we should be looking at. We should be ensuring that life of the mother in every instance is protected. We should ensure, which is one of the reasons I was one of 8 Republicans just a few weeks ago to vote to ensure that women have access to contraceptives. There's some basic things we can be doing that all of us agree on, the vast majority of people agree on, and aren't fringy on either side of the aisle. But that's not what we're doing right now.
No, it's not. And I think that, I guess I'm curious, how do you propose, because you bring up the issue that I think is maybe impossible to create, which is if you believe in this, if you view abortion through the eyes of morality, there's no such thing as moderation. So how do you legislate moderation here when neither side is comfortable with that compromise?
Well, I actually don't think it's that difficult when you're looking at it from that perspective, too. If you look at it from Congress, from our role, I mean, there can be reasonable gestational limits for most people. 75% of Americans want some guardrails. They support guardrails on abortion, whether they're pro-choice or pro-life. Only 25% are really, on the fringes of either side on this particular issue. So if you look at gestational limits, whether it's 15 weeks or 20 weeks, whether you ensure protection for fetal abnormalities, life of the mother in every instance, or certainly rape and incest victims, there are things in there that we can all agree on as Americans. And particularly in a state, whether it's South Carolina or any other state that's banning abortion altogether or trying to, then women's access to contraceptives has got to be a guarantee. We have rural counties in South Carolina without a single OBGYN doctor. How is a woman supposed to get any kind of care, health care, medical care, prenatal care, care for her infant, when those resources don't exist? And so you've got to look at it, I think, from a very, centrist perspective, which is where 75% of America is. Put in guardrails that they're comfortable with, and let's move forward. And we can do this at the federal level and give some guidance to states, or states can do it as well. But we're seeing the extremities, and we're going to continue to until Congress steps in, see extremities on both sides, which is not where the American people are.
It seems like you think Congress has to step in here. You brought up the OBGYN issue. 15 states right now want to criminalize the doctor. Okay, want to make the, basically, if there's a crime committed here, it's not the woman, it would be the doctor. As you know, you already talked about the problem of getting OBGYN into practicing in rural South Carolina. A lot of these OBGYNs don't want to practice in states with these restrictive laws because they don't know, you know, they have to sit here and wait to declare an emergency to intervene medically. And so they figure, you know what, I'm going to practice medicine in a state that makes the abortion law safe. How do you do this? How do you fix this federally?
It is going to be an issue. I do think that Congress, because Roe v. Wade was overturned, that we do have an opportunity here to work together to ensure that that those things don't take place. And you can't do that at the federal level with legislation, but in this particular issue, it's going to take Republicans and Democrats working together to get it in a place where you can do it in a bicameral fashion, in a bipartisan fashion, and pass legislation. And I think you can look at gestational limits that are reasonable for most Americans, but also you've got, and one of my concerns is you've got states that are going to try to ban women from traveling, that if you're raped, that you've got to report it to the police. Well, I was raped when I was 16, and it took me a week to tell my mother. By that time, any evidence would have been gone. And the violation of a woman's privacy, I can't tell you how traumatic that event was in my life. In my own home state, they want women to be required and mandated to report when they are raped. And I just can't even imagine a world where you're a girl, a teenage girl who's been raped, to have to report those things. And, you know, Handmaid's Tale was not supposed to be a roadmap, right? Yeah. This is a place where we can be in the center, we can protect life, and we can protect where people are on both sides of the aisle. And so it's important to take that perspective, and that's the perspective that Congress should have on everything that we do. But as you know, we're just so divided.
Bottom line, do you think it is bad if the Republican Party becomes the party of abortion bans?
Well, I am staunchly pro-life. I have a 100% pro-life voting record. I do think that it will be an issue in November if we're not moderating ourselves, that we are including exceptions for women who've been raped, for girls who are victims of incest, and certainly in every instance where the life of the mother is at stake. And that is a position that I have staked out that's really important to me personally, but that's where the vast majority of women are in my state. And I'm going to continue to fight for those things, but we can't go to the far corners of the right or the far corners of the left, because the left wants abortion for any reason up until the birth of the child, which is insane to me and insane to most of America. So somewhere in the middle is where we've got to meet, and I do believe that Congress has a role, and I want to play a part in that role in shaping policy for the future for every American in our country.
Congresswoman Nancy Mace, Republican from South Carolina. Her district basically represents a large part of Charleston, South Carolina. Congresswoman, thanks for coming on and sharing your perspective.
Thank you.